Good afternoon. I think we are going to be your caffeine hit for the afternoon, and we're excited to do that. I am Antara Ganguly. I am the director of the Angai Secretariat, and you see on the screen behind us something that Angai works on along with our partners, gender transformative education, which is what this session is about. And I'm really, really excited to do this session together with my sister, Ashley Burnett. She is part of Angai and the Transform Educators Network that Angai hosts. Over to you, Ashley.
Good afternoon, everyone. Imagine change. Imagine a shift so big that creators spring a new day with bright smiles and backpacks filled with possibilities. Let's backtrack to what first began as hope to transform education. Imagine transformation, rooted in ending stereotypes, rooted in care and love, rooted in equality and justice. But guess what? We don't have to imagine anymore, because here is change. Here is transformation. Here is gender transformative education.
We now want to invite onto stage our comrades and colleagues who will join us for this session. I invite the Deputy Executive Director of UNFPA, Ms. Diane Keta. I hope I'm saying her name all right. And Ishan.
And I now bring on stage Ms. Naharu, who is the Director for Planning for the Ministry of Education in Honduras. El Salvador.
Over there.
Yes. And Diana Ayala, a GP youth leader from Honduras.
So Angai and Transform Education, we work very closely together with many of our partners, including UNICEF and Plan International, amongst others, and GPE, on really putting on the table and defining what is gender transformative education. One thing we were talking about earlier is everyone is talking about gender transformative education. We love that. But does everyone love what gender transformative education actually means? So we're going to dig into that today and have a really good discussion on that.
My name is Ashley Burnett, and I am the co-coordinator for Transform Education, a young feminist coalition that's being hosted by Angai. And I will also be a co-moderator for this session. This event is a joint effort from the Global Partnership for Education, Angai, Plan International, Transform Education, and UNICEF. Today we will be exploring gender transformative education, and through a series of intergenerational dialogues, our panelists will be taking on the common myths and misconceptions that surround this concept and challenging them with evidence, which we know is very important. Their lived experiences and what can be achieved when we work together.
Now, everybody who's here in Paris for TES doesn't need to be converted on the power of education. We're here because we believe in the power of education. And education largely seems to mean today numeracy and literacy, the ability to read and count. However, what we have not made as much headway on is the power of education to achieve gender equality. And I will submit that there isn't yet a country in the world anywhere that has really fully exploited the potential of the education system to do that.
And this is exactly why we need education that is gender transformative. Because gender transformative education, it utilizes all parts of the education system. So you can think about it and think about all the moving parts, every part of the education system, and all of its stakeholders to transform harmful stereotypes, norms, and practices for gender equality. It challenges power relations and raises critical consciousness about the root causes of inequality and systems of oppression.
So this is really related to everything that's happening in the world today. It's related to the war in Ukraine. It's related to the many crises happening in Syria, in Yemen, in Turkey. It's related to the backlash against rights that are happening in many countries around the world. So what is gender transformative education? Is it really just about empowering girls and women? It is not. Gender transformative education is really about freeing children from those harmful norms that we have grown up with and that we unintentionally pass on to them. So this is very much about boys. This is about helping boys not feel that they have to grow up to be powerful, often violent men who control the thinking and the work of other people, women, girls, and people of all genders.
And during this discussion, whilst we are on stage, we also want to hear from you because we want to know how we can also make that happen collectively. So for those who are attending in person, for those of you who are joining us online, please submit your questions to our panel through the Slido poll, which should come up soon. So you would see the code there that you can submit your questions. So even if you're in the audience, if you're online, you can submit your questions here and join the conversation.
So something we hear a lot at UNGA is, why are we talking about gender transformative education? We've basically achieved gender parity. Now, there are a couple of things to unpack here. First, gender parity simply means that you have the same number of girls and boys, and it doesn't count children of other genders, in a classroom or in a school. So if you look at something like gross enrollment, for example, it literally is just a measure of what percentage of children in a catchment area as defined by a census are actually in a school. So to say that gender parity is the same as gender equality is actually incorrect. It's the first step towards achieving gender equality. You can have gender parity in a school where children are experiencing massive gender inequality, where there is a lot of gender-based violence, and where there is no gender-responsive teaching at all. Gender parity is a step to get there, but to say that gender parity measures gender inequality is a little bit like being in a thunderstorm, taking out a teaspoon and saying, here, I've got water in my teaspoon, I'm measuring the thunderstorm. You're getting a little bit of it, but a very little bit of it. As an example, there's evidence to show that girls have better learning outcomes than boys in many situations. Let's look at what that really means. This means that for those children who go to school, girls often do have better learning outcomes than boys in some countries. But we're not looking at the learning outcomes of the girls and boys who are not in school. So in some countries, the number of in-school children is less than 40%. So if you're measuring the learning of 37% of children in the country, are you really able to say something about gender gaps in learning? And then if you're not looking at gender equality, what you're not picking up is that for those out-of-school children, are girls learning the same as boys? If you give an out-of-school girl and an out-of-school boy a smartphone, will that out-of-school girl pick up and start working on that smartphone as comfortably as the boy? Now, Ashley, you coordinate a global network of young feminist activists and organizations, and you work very much as a CSE educator as well. What are some of the misconceptions you've come across on this issue?
Thank you so much for that question and for your previous intervention. As a CSE educator and young persons, I hear a lot of misconceptions as it relates to transforming education, particularly when it comes to talking about inclusive classrooms and learning material. And people I have come into contact with are often of the belief that using language that is rooted in gender stereotypes and not discussing issues such as consent or safer sex will protect children, when ultimately it excludes learners like me, who do not fit those gender stereotypes and are unable to see themselves represented in the classroom. In addition, a lack of quality CSE, and I say quality because I know sometimes we get watered down curriculum for CSE, which doesn't really do the job. But quality CSE really covers, what we need to learn about ourselves, to feel confident in our bodies, and to interact with the world around us. CSE equips young people with accurate and relevant information to understand and question social norms and practices concerning sexuality, gender equality, and relationships, and contribute positively to society. So integrating CSE into national curricula is a crucial component of gender transformative education, and to promote quality education, health, and well-being for children and youth in all their diversity. And if we're not doing that, we aren't fulfilling that goal.
Thank you so much for that, Ashley, and thank you for putting in the word quality. I think all of us struggle to make sure that we're not just ticking boxes in our work, but that there's real meaning behind that. Ashley, I'll turn it back to you to bring in our colleagues into the discussion.
Welcome, you both. I'm really excited to have this conversation where we're going to delve into gender transformative education in early years, which I'm sure we're going to learn so much from lived experiences and really practical information. So we will now introduce our next intergenerational discussion with Ms. Najarro, Director for Planning for the Ministry of Education in El Salvador, and Diana Ayala, a GPE youth leader from Honduras. So I'm beginning with you, Ms. Najarro. We often hear that gender transformative education cannot be done in early years, yet El Salvador's new partnership compact with the Global Partnership for Education has a really strong focus on gender equality in early years of education. Can you challenge this misconception by sharing more about this process and what you are trying to achieve?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to say thanks for being here, for being part of this experience and sharing with you all the process that we have back in El Salvador. I have to translate to Spanish now because it's much easier for me to say the ideas and all the work we have done for the past few years. So, la pregunta
the question that we have been asking ourselves, having heard the conversation in the previous panel amongst the youth, is what are we here for? What do we want to achieve? We are the decision makers. And so what are the decisions that we're going to be taking? What are the changes, the structural changes that we would like to introduce into an educational system? Because we do believe that these changes can be made through education. We've heard that a gender focus is something can be a driver that cuts across all areas. But it's not just a question of teaching materials or in teaching practices of educators themselves. We want further changes. We want clear policies, concise policies when it comes to the use of data. For example, when we look at the repeat rates, they're higher amongst girls. When we look at success rates, it's higher for boys. When we look at dropout rates, voluntarily or involuntary because of girls under the age of 17 getting pregnant with an unwanted pregnancy, well, we can see that the gap is even greater. The GPE process that El Salvador is engaged in, and that has been going alongside a government nationwide plan for developing education in keeping with the SDGs. This is a process that is extremely interesting, where we have learned so much alongside GPE, along with other countries who've shared their experiences with us. We see the evidence goes beyond just a narrow set of data. Studies give us a snapshot of a baseline in some cases, and we see that, again, going back to pregnant girls who have to drop out of school early, they never come back for a variety of different reasons, so they never get back into the education system. So policies have to be much more proactive. They have to be designed in such a way that they're going to transform the educational system itself. And these are decisions that should be made here and now. Our institutional reform plan in El Salvador beyond quality learning experiences and teacher training, and beyond safe environments where there can be a great difference between a health center for girls that is friendly and safe, something where people can learn and feel safe and in comfort. So I will wrap up my comments now and look forward to any questions that spring up during our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the commitment that you all are engaging in to ensure that, beyond the classroom, that there are policies that can really ensure that girls are, stay in school. Because I think that's an issue that affects a lot of countries where girls, they become pregnant and they're unable to return to the classroom. And that just exacerbates several issues. We talk about poverty, right, and then employment and a lot of things like that. So I'm really happy that you're doing that work and also have the support of GPE. I now pass to you, Diana. People might think that it is not appropriate to talk about gender and gender norms when it comes to young children, or to really break down gender stereotypes from an early age. Can you share about what you have learned from your work on school-related gender-based violence and why this is so important?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So thank you for that question, and I'm also happy to be here with Mrs. Najarro, because I'm Salvadorian also. Yes, I was born in El Salvador, and I lived there until I was 12 years old. So I'm so happy to have my double nationality and know that my native country is actually doing great work with GPE. I'm so emotional right now, so thank you. So to answer the question, I think that gender transformative education, it's important to break down negative stereotypes that are built in the mind of little kids. Since they're very little, these stereotypes are in their minds, and they come from different places. They come from schools, they come from even their families, the community where they grow up, the people that they relate, the society where they are growing up, having these negative stereotypes, which later on lead to gender-based violence. And this violence threats the lives of the kids in the way that they're not able to go to school anymore because nothing is happening inside the learning centers, because we don't have trained teachers also as well, that they know how to, achieve and approach a better learning for girls and how to manage these things and have these policies that will back up also the work of teachers and that will back up girls and boys as well, because boys also suffer from violence in schools, not only girls. So I think that if we have this gender transformative approach, we can lead to successful education and a quality education in our countries. And I also think that violence in and around the schools is a global issue with devastating consequences, like kids dropping school. And in Honduras, we've been working with teachers, with civil society, with youth, engaging all together in intersectional work to actually know that gender is not only talking about girls and boys, it's not only having inclusive language, it's not only about that. It's about, like Mrs. Najarro said, making policies that are like strong and that they're radical, bringing actual changes to the countries. It's like, for example, I can share it, like sometimes in school we have boys that are hitting girls and we're telling them, no, it's okay because he likes you, and that's a way of showing love. And then they're having this in their mind, the girls, that, oh no, it's okay to receive violence because that's how boys show affection and love. And then they're having this in their mind and growing up, and I even grew up in a culture that it's teaching you that you have to serve men, and that men are to be served, and that's the right thing to do. And then you have to drop your dreams and everything you want to do because you have to attend home. And that shouldn't be like put onto you, because women can do everything they want. And like these are like specific stereotypes that are built in girls' mind that violence is okay. because that's a way of showing love, and that needs to stop, because violence is not a way of love in any form. And I think that addressing gender norms in young children also means addressing gender norms everywhere. Even in ministries, we have to have parity in ministries, having more women in decision-making places, having more girls to know that they can actually have a voice and that they will achieve everything that they want. So through GPEs, with KICS project and EOL, we've been working a lot with Foro Dakar, which is my national coalition, trying to talk to teachers and also try to change attitudes that are, like we mentioned before. We have to change, yes, policies, be radical and have changes in the country, but we also have to start from very top to very bottom, like changing these attitudes in teacher, and they understanding that violence is not okay and that they have to respect the rights of boys and girls, and that gender transformative education, it's a way of achieving a more successful country and having better quality of life for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana. And I'm really happy that you really showed the role gender plays in gender-based violence, because we all know gender is a social construct. And if we can make it as a society, we can definitely break it. It will just take some time. But just a final question to you both. And I think this is really great alignment, because you being from El Salvador and you all are doing work at different levels. So just in a few words, when it comes to your work and your leadership, how important it is to you to have that intergenerational partnership, but also if you can just share like one small example as to how you engage in that.
Okay. Thank you for that question. In El Salvador, we have a lot of experience working, for example, with the GPE. We have the local group from the society, and this is making a big difference between working alone, just the Ministry of Education, making policies directly saying what they want to do or how they would like to be done, and it's different from all the process that we have, for example, with the compact. The compact means that we have to agree to have consensus between the level of the government, between teachers, and also with the society.
Well, I think two main things are very important. One is financing, and I will continue saying this. Financing education is the best way that we have to achieve. I know education it's not based on not teaching kids to have money, but we need money to fund education. We need money to, achieve things, have better policies, engage civil society. And the other thing is that, like she was mentioning, we have to work intersectionally, having civil society engage in actually knowing what the policies are. What are the policies that we have in the country? How are we achieving the SDG 4 or any other things in education? So I think that working between different sectors is very important to not only be monitoring governments, but also supporting them and working together to achieve things. Thank you.
Thank you both, and I feel so inspired. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I pass it over to you, Antara.
I have so many follow-up questions for both of you, but let's now turn to, I hope I'm saying your name right, Dienekata? And Ishan, I don't know your last name. Ishan Shah. We are excited to hear from you more on your work on gender transformative education and your vision for gender transformative education. Ishan, let me start with you. A common misconception is that country-level processes around education are bureaucratic, very high level, difficult to get into, and so not exactly the right place for young people. I think you have done things differently, and I'd love to hear from you on that. And then, very importantly, I would love to hear your reflections on the important role of men and boys in supporting gender equality and in gender transformative education?
Thank you very much. Firstly, like sort of fellow youth colleagues have done previously, I'd like to recognize my privilege of being here today. There are so many youth voices who couldn't make it for various reasons, most notably the visa issues, which is sort of a big barrier towards youth participation, accessibility to conferences like this. But I think it's important to ground ourselves a bit, have a bit of a reality check, because I think some of us can get a bit sort of looped up in being in Paris, you know, in a conference like this. But really, we're in an education crisis, aren't we? And as with many other issues that we face today, whether it's climate change or conflict or trafficking in persons, gender-based violence, it's women and girls who are really disproportionately impacted, right? And yet, women and girls and youth, but particularly women and girls, are on the front lines. They're leading these efforts. And yet they're not meaningfully included. And we talk a lot about meaningful participation of young people. We throw these words around, but what does it actually mean? And so last year, during the Generation Equality Forums, youth co-authored the Young Feminist Manifesto, which is a beautiful document, a very comprehensive document on how we can really concretize and really implement meaningful youth participation. And it happens under the 3 principles of co-leadership, co-creation, and co-ownership. And this means bringing young people into decision-making spaces and into efforts at all levels, at the grassroots levels, within NGOs and civil society organizations, but also at the international levels, within governments, within ministries, you know, making sure that they're really at the heart of everything that we do. This also means funding, as you mentioned, funding, but accessible and flexible funding for youth networks, for individual youths, and for youth collectives and organizations who are really on the front lines driving the change, because that's where the actions are happening on the grassroots level. And education is so important because education is a tool to progress gender equality, and gender equality is a tool to progress quality education. That's really important to remember. You know, the SDG round, so there's the symbol, it's a circle. All of these SDGs are interconnected, and we cannot just target one and say, you know, we've done it. We have to achieve all 17, and that can only be done through multi-stakeholder and intergenerational action. And that means all stakeholders working together. And that's exactly what we need, because we're seeing young people on the front lines already driving the change. But we need that political and corporate will to act, to fund youth, to resource youth for capacity building, to make sure that our voices are being meaningfully included. You know, we live in a world that is built and dominated by men. You know, I'm not sure how many of people here identify themselves as men, but we reap the benefits, and we go about our lives often, you know, not thinking how much how much the patriarchy benefits us, right? And so we really need to think about gender inequality as a structural issue. You know, we may have not picked up the tools to build the patriarchy ourselves, but that doesn't mean that we can't work to dismantle it now and to really break it down and to ensure that women and girls are being placed at the decision-making center. So I invite all the people here who identify as men to stand up, if that's okay with you. All the men in the room, could you stand up? Now, I invite you all to commit to a lifelong journey of learning, of listening to women and girls. And if you don't want to, then please do feel free to sit down. But I think you'll get some youth activists running your way straight away. I invite you to remain standing if you really commit to recognize the power that you hold, whether that's in the household, in your place of work, in the government you may be working in. I invite you to commit to gender equality, to commit to quality education, to listening to women and girls and placing their voices at the center of all your efforts. Recognize your power and use it to dismantle the very structures that are disproportionately impacting and harming women and girls. We live in a world dominated and run by us, and it is our duty now, as women and girls have been asking for generations now, to really stand up and fight for gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Ishan. That was rousing and great to see all the allies we have in the room who will work with us. Madame Ketta, I will now turn to you. What are your thoughts on gender transformative education? And how can gender transformative education help us achieve gender equality? And how can young people really take leadership on this?
Thank you so very much for that question. But please allow me to congratulate my young fellow here for his powerful, powerful initiative. Now I'm going to turn into French, if you allow me.
I would like to start where the lady from El Salvador left off. Namely, what are the decisions that governments should take when it comes to education? What are the changes to be introduced into the system in order that it truly be transformative in terms of gender, in terms of equality? Education is a tremendous force to change cultures. In the United Nations Fund for Population, we had a session on gender violence, but imagine a transformative education wherein a young girl can fearlessly move from her classroom to her toilet, menstruate without shame, return home, and explain to her mother what she learned at school. So what we call gender transformative really amounts to combining the role of education with the role of the immediately surrounding society. Parents in particular, sometimes parents don't really have contact with the school except when their child is recalcitrant. So how can the parents and the rest of the society be involved in the educative process as well? And that all has to do with culture, with the surrounding culture. And that's really the only chance that one has in such a forum as this one, which is extraordinary to have an intergenerational dialogue. But young people, of course, well, there are many different levels. I mean, there are those who are barely walking, there's the middle age, and there are the older adolescents, if you will. And you need also to have that transformation running through the different cohorts of young people at different ages. And when we talk about this digital era today, it is also necessary that young people contribute to the education of their parents. There are certain ideas, there are certain concepts that are better vehiculated by young people than by older people, and I think that that is truly transformative. Let's look at the COVID period, which is now coming to an end. Young people were absolutely essential for education to continue out there in the field. Without young people, there would have been no education. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. A follow-up question, since you brought up digital platforms, and you're right, all of us engage on this, right? I mean, the first time my mother sent me an email when I was in college, she sent me blank email after blank email. And now she finds the most interesting Instagram posts on feminism and sends them to me. There is a massive digital gender gap. And it's something that we are concerned is not being taken up at the highest level. So as we move to remote learning, we take forward of the gains of remote learning through COVID, we are very nervous that this is going to leave behind the most marginalized children who do not have access to electricity. Forget about smartphones and laptops. but B, it's just going to exacerbate the digital inequality between girls and boys. I would love to hear from all of you on how does this fit in? On one hand, this is an exciting new, it could truly be an equalizer, right? Because, you know, it can have AI, it can simultaneously translate, technology can really bring people together. It doesn't care what you look like, it doesn't care about your skin color. But then on the other hand, you know, the haves are getting it before the have-nots, especially on gender. I would love to, any of you who would like to respond, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Si me lo permite, vuelvo al español.
If you'll allow me, I'll go back to speaking Spanish. Public policy obviously needs to be standardized in some way, to go from one government to another. And in this way, to be able to guarantee that there will be funding for education and that these policies be implemented. However, we know that in some countries, that's not what happens. In the case of El Salvador, there is a decided, let's say, a decided decision that's a bit redundant right now to give laptops to students because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We needed to step up these processes of virtual teaching and transform teaching into platforms that could be differentiated between virtual and what we might call online or existing in other forms like manuals for students. And so what's happening is that we're giving computing equipment to small children. Even before third grade, we're giving them tablets with internet service and with programs already loaded. And then starting in fourth grade up until the second year of high school, that's more middle school for us in El Salvador, we're giving them laptops. And one way of having the equality we want to have between boys and girls is using these computational abilities that give them access to internet, for instance.
Let me take just a quick example to make it simple. You know, I think government, I love what the Senora said, because government need to take action. Virtual study allow a younger who is pregnant to continue studying when she's kicked out of school. As simple as that. Just a simple thing to be talking about. 1 out of 4 girls are either victim of violence or get pregnant. So I think that this could be a way to keep them, to give them the chance to continue. I'll stop there.
That's very true. There is, however, data showing that and this is from Asia and the Pacific, which is higher on digital adoption by children and young people than other regions of the world. 47% of adolescent boys utilize smartphones, not even own smartphones, utilize, versus 27% of girls. What can education ministries do to solve this? What would you like to see, Diana and Ishan? Diana or Diana? Diana. Diana. What would you like to see happen to make sure that when a girl picks up a smartphone, she knows exactly what to do, just as when a boy picks up a smartphone?
Yes, so I think that it's very important to understand that it's not only just providing the equipment or the materials or the technology, it's also providing the teaching of how to use these equipments. So I think that it's almost necessary to look for applications or ways to have technology that is adapted to, for example, people with disabilities, because we tend to forget about this sector a lot of times. We have computers, we have laptops, we have textbooks that are virtual, but what's happening with people that are not able to hear? What's happening to people that are not able to see? So we have to include them also in the technology plans that we have and not letting them out, because it happens most of the time. And as well with the indigenous groups, because we tend to for example, in Honduras, we try them to understand and speak in Spanish because that's the main language of the country, but they have their own language also, and we have to respect cultures. We have to respect their beliefs, their language, what they do, everything that they are, because it's part of them, and we can't forget about that. I'm Honduran, but I'm also Salvadorian, and I love my culture as well. So I think that technology should be by hand. Gender transformative education, it's hand by hand with technology. If we create the policies, and if we create in the spaces, and if we fund the way of including everyone in gender transformative education, include everyone in, technology, not only having technology for one sector, but all should be included in this. And we have to have the teachers trained to know how to deal with technology, because it's not only kids suffering from lack of technology, of the digital divide, it's also teachers and educators that are not having these tools and that are not understanding how to use them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panel for really... Sure, go ahead.
I can see the timer going off. I just want to say that the people who don't have access, the young people who don't have access to the technology right now are going to be excluded from the conversations that we're having at this summit. Many ministers and government delegations are present today. There's a lot of youth in the room from various regions and various countries who are ready to speak to you, to influence the ministerial declaration that's going to happen tomorrow. And also we have, as National Gender Youth Advocates, UN Women, we have our youth recommendations, so come and find us and we will give them to you. This will really place gender equality at the center of the declarations that are being published as a result of this summit. But thank you.
Thank you all so much for really bringing to the forefront gender transformative education for us to achieve gender equality. So at this point, just have time for one final question that we got from the audience. We got really great questions, but we're just going to take one because of time. Do you think it's possible to promote gender transformative education in emergencies? Quick, short responses.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm going to add a question to that, especially for colleagues from ministries. What does gender parity at ministries of education look like? What's your vision? What do you want to see for gender parity, gender equality in ministries of education?
I really would like to see what parity means, 50-50, but that's not possible because a lot of women don't have the preparation. They don't go to school. They even don't finish secondary education. So we are less women prepared at the university level than men. And what I would like to see is more women finish tertiary education. That's what I would like to see.
Based on your prior experience, what would you like to see? What's your dream for gender equality in Ministry of Education?
Well, like my past, my dream is that every young woman, every young girl goes to school together, feeling safe, both of them, that they are paritarian, that they should work together, grow up together, so that they can support each other for their family lives. And that is very, very important, I think. And just like Diana said, it is important, all those categories that exist, but there are so many. We are just finishing the Pride Month now. In New York, it was just fantastic. Being inclusive and tolerant. That's what I want gender transformative to look like and to mean for all of us. Thank you.
I don't think we can conclude with a better sentence. This is our vision and our dream as transforming education and UNGAI and UNICEF and PLAN. Thank you for that beautiful vision. We believe gender equality can only be intersectional, can only be led by the most vulnerable people on the ground who are experiencing the barriers far more powerfully than those of us sitting here, which is a point that Ishan also brought up. So on that note, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And thank you to our wonderful panel. I think we can give them a round of applause. I would now like to invite on stage, is she here? Oh, she's here remotely. We have had a young feminist illustrator draw our session as she has heard it. Her name is Heather, and this is what she drew on our panel.